So I'm an atheist, agnostic atheist who believes in objective morality, but I view objective morality, I guess, different than a lot of atheists and theists alike. To me, something can be said to be objectively wrong or right based on comparisons. So, just like your name is Christian, you have a birth certificate somewhere, I presume, that says your name is Christian. So if I was to call you Peter, I would be objectively wrong based on how your parents have and the hospital or the government has defined your name. Your name is defined as Christian. That's your name. So if I call you any other name, I'm objectively wrong. But you could legally change your name in the future and become Peter. And so if I called you Peter, then I would be objectively right, even though it used to be Christian. So I view morality in the same way. So you have to, and I view morality as a personal thing, ethics as a community thing. So we all have, I think, a moral code that we live by, and most people share a lot of common things within that moral code. But I have my own box, which I label Doug's morality, and then I put stuff in that box subjectively. But things that I think most people on this planet agree on, concepts like well-being, unnecessary suffering. So when I see someone throwing battery acid in another person's face, that doesn't promote well-being. So I can objectively say that is morally wrong based on how I've defined what is morally wrong. So I subjectively put things in my box, and then when I see an action, then I look at that action and I compare it to what's in my box, and I can make a moral judgment on it based on how I've defined morality. Now, the theist might say, well, but that's just your opinion, Doug. And I'd say, yes, it is. And I admit I subjectively put things in my box. But, Mr. or Mrs. Theist, you do the exact same thing. You put in your box your God. Could you have not chosen a different God, Mr. or Mrs. Theist? You worship right now Allah, but you could have worshiped Jesus, or you could have worshiped Vishnu. You decided to put Allah in your box, subjectively. You, the subject, decided that to base your morality based on Allah or Vishnu or Jesus. So just like I have put subjectively things into my box, the theist has done the same because they could have chosen to use a different standard of morality by worshiping a different God. And so when the theist, let's say a Christian, sees something that a moral action, they can say, oh, this is morally wrong because of how they have defined subjectively the standard of right and wrong based on the nature of their God. So it's not much different than what I'm doing. Another,
Okay.
and this is what I think Science Pete was getting at. Whether a theist chooses their God or not, and if there is a God, then there is a different type of objective morality. That whether we even know it or not, believe it or not, recognize it or not, it's out there. And
Yeah.
and I think that's what Pete was getting at this like static goalpost that doesn't change.
Mm.
And I admit that could be true. But then we have another problem. And the problem then becomes, how could we even know with any degree of certainty what that objective standard is? Just because you
Yeah.
read it in the Bible doesn't make it true. Just because you read it in another holy text doesn't make it true. And even if it is within a holy text, then you have the problem of interpretations and application. So you're stuck in the same position as I think the non-believer of struggling, thinking, being critical about your own worldview and how to apply it, how to interpret it. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. So first, this last point really resonates with me, and I don't want to leave it unexplored. But I think right now there are 3 points that I'm like juggling in my mind, and I don't want to lose track of either of them. So one is, yeah, even if an objective morality exists, or even if a God exists, you still have to you still have to rely on yourself to figure that out and possibly be mistaken. And that argument goes for much more than just morality. It goes against claiming knowledge of God in general. So
Right.
that's one of them. Second point is, well, is this is the term objective useful? Is that a useful label for the morality you are describing? And
I
I
think
don't
it
want to
is.
get it. Yes, okay, but I mean, that's not the most interesting part for me, but it is what I would expect a theist to bring up. And the final point, and I'm just laying them out there so we can get into them one by one, basically. And the final point is, well, if there is a God and he has defined morality for us, for the world, is that then objective, or is that just God's opinion? Is that still subjective? But it's the boss's opinion.
Right.
I'm right now. I'm yeah. I'm basically leaning towards that view that even if God has laid down the law, it's still the opinion of a mind. But that may be a technical issue as well. Oftentimes, for example, with the Calvinist, you hear, well, uh, it has been revealed to me, and God is infallible, so I can be certain of this because God is infallible. Right? We have even heard the question. I think you've even asked it in role playing. The question, well, it's the psi question, right? Is it possible for an omnipotent God to reveal himself in a way for me to be certain, right?
Right.
And I think I would actually say no to that question. My answer would be no. It's not possible, not because of the omnipotence of the God, but because of the fallibility of the receiver. Your certainty is not justified because of your fallibility. So even if the God is perfect and he can put that information in your head, you cannot differentiate between that and the hallucination.
Yeah, the way I sometimes describe it is a broadcaster and a receptor, or a receiver. Even if you
Yeah,
have a perfect high voltage broadcasting signal, if your receiver is screwed up, the
yeah,
message is
that's
not
a
going to
good
get
one.
across. Across.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I think I'm totally with you on that point. And if we bring it back to morality, um, yeah, even if objective morality exists, we still all have to figure it out, and maybe we can't actually figure it out, and then we're still left with all these different views. So you could almost say that in a sense it doesn't actually matter.
Well, the thing that, and this just happened last week with some theists I was talking to on Twitter. When it comes to objective morality for a lot of Christians, they will make comments like, well, if there isn't this concept of objective morality, then it's a matter of opinion, and you can't say something is always wrong. And then I gently remind them that their God, that morality has changed in the Bible.
Mm. And which they will then deny and
Yeah.
offer excuses for.
Yeah. And then I
So
hear terms like covenants, new and old, and you just have
yeah,
to
yeah,
understand
yeah.
the context and all this sort of thing.
The thing is, you hear that a lot, right? It's the same as, well, if there is no God, then life's meaningless. It's it's in the same corner. It seems to me, and it really sounds to me like they are confusing desirability with probability. So, would you, for example, would it be useful to ask, well, do you want there to do you want an objective morality to exist, and does you wanting that make it more likely? Does it,
Yeah.
because that often seems to be a part of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think um, when someone can say something is always, always, always wrong, it gives them certainty. It removes uncertainty. I would
Yeah,
say the majority of Homo sapiens prefer certainty over uncertainty. Most people like a stable paycheck every 2 weeks. There's a small percentage of the population who's okay with lumpy cash flow. And I'm one of the people who can be happy with lumpy cash flow and without the certainty of my income. But most people are not like that. I think that's true what I'm saying. And I think this is relates very well to religion and theism is they desire almost like a rule book of God saying this is right, this is wrong, this is how you should live your life.
yeah. So I've never really seen that hashed out, that expanded upon. Um it really seems that it's so mixed in there for the theist. Well, it can be wrong. It can be morality can be subjective because that would be bad. And I haven't come across a conversation or debate or anything where that is really explored and where it's actually
Yeah.
expressed.
One good example that I could bring up, and I think I have in the past, is if they are coming from the point of view that subjectivity in terms of morality is bad, you could bring up examples of, for example, lying. It doesn't take someone, if someone has even a little bit of an imagination, you can think of examples where lying is good, where lying can
Sure.
actually save someone's life.
Hiding Jews from the Nazis.
Even stealing. You can think of examples where taking something that doesn't belong to you can save millions of people's lives. I sometimes use the someone who's spent $10,000 of their own money to make a bomb detonator, and they're going to use that detonator to kill millions of people. And you sneak into their house one night, you suspect that they're doing this, and then you sneak into their house one night and you see, oh yeah, this is a detonator, and you figure out what it's going to detonate and all these things, and you steal it. It doesn't belong to you, but you steal that detonator, and you save millions of lives because of it. You took something that
Yeah.
didn't belong to you for a greater good.
So yeah, so it might be useful to really hammer down on subjective morality not being as bad as
Yeah.
they think. Yeah. This actually crosses over into my other main thought, which I haven't expressed yet here, which is the focus on tactics. And that might sound a bit like a dirty word, but the focus on,
Talk
I
dirty
don't know
to
a
me,
better word for it,
CJ.
right?
Sorry.
Yeah, but I think we should leave that for now. So the way you and I can explore a topic probably differs from how we would cover this topic when we're with other people. Um, but that's what I mean by tactics. But tactics kind of sounds like the script, like the you know, it kind of sounds bad in a way. But I don't know. I have a better word for it right now. I
See,
don't mean it in a bad way.
one thing that really irritates me is when I'm talking to theists and they can't admit that good, how they've defined what's morally good or what's morally wrong, does change within their holy text. And I've brought up things like abortion, human sacrifice, just this past week.
Yeah,
Like,
I've seen the examples. Yeah,
yeah, and it just, I just think they're not being intellectually honest with themselves. Because if there was a woman in front of us right now who is pregnant, and you said to her, CJ, do you want this baby? Was this a planned pregnancy? And she says, no, I really don't want to be pregnant. And you said to her, oh, here, drink this. And if you drink it, the baby will die inside you, or fetus, whatever you want to call it. And most people would say, oh, that's a form of abortion. But yet, this is exactly what happened in Numbers 5 in most Christians' holy text, where a husband says, hey, I'm suspecting my wife of cheating on me. Drink this. The priest says, drink this potion, magic potion. And if you have been cheating, that baby inside you would die. But here's where the intellectual dishonesty kicks in. When humans do it, it's called abortion. When God does it, it's called justice. When a person grabs another person and kills that person as a gift to a deity, that's called human sacrifice. When God does it in Exodus 23, it's called justice. The exact same action. So even if there's this concept of objective morality, it almost ends up being divine command theory. Whatever God commands is becomes good. The exact same
yeah.
actions.
Which is like my third point is it's still subjective. It's just the boss decides.
Right.
Might makes right.
Yeah. God can do whatever he wants. So what any human would do, it would be called immoral, but if God does it, then it becomes good.
Yeah, and he can change the rules. Yeah. So it sounds like we're pretty much in agreement on the content so far, in that we might not actually call a God's morality objective just because it comes from God, and we all also agree that even if such a morality exists, we're still left with figuring out, and maybe our inability to figure out that actual morality.
Yeah. Like if there is an objective morality and if there is a God out there, what does this God say about stem cell research? Is it morally right or morally wrong? You know, and the answer is it depends on which God. And this is really interesting. The Muslim belief system would say it's not morally wrong. It might not be morally right, but it's definitely not morally wrong because in the Muslim belief system, uh, the embryo is not a soul; it's not a person. Whereas in a lot of Christian viewpoints, it is. So the Christian morality system would say, yeah, it is morally wrong to use an embryo for stem cell research, whereas the Muslim belief system would say, no, it's fine. And and technically, well, not technically, in a way, they worship the same God. Uh, in one, at least a third of the way. They don't believe in the Holy Spirit and Jesus, the Muslims, but
So if we're in agreement about these 2 points, maybe we should then talk about your own statement of objective morality and whether it's useful to use the label objective for that, because it sounds like that's where you and I might differ. That may also be where you and Pete differ.
yeah. And I remember
Maybe I'm more on the side of Pete. Yeah.
yeah, and I think I know where you're going with this. Why use the term objective in terms of morality? Um, for pragmatic reasons.
Yeah.
I I think
Okay, so
yeah,
pragmatism is maybe a better word than tactics.
yeah.
Maybe that's what I meant. Pragmatism. Yeah.
So I really don't care what word we use to make that comparison between two things. I use the word objective because if once you have a definition of what's on a specific action on what would be right, what would be wrong, and then you can compare it. Yeah, I call that objective because we have that clear definition. But practically, I think it gives theists comfort when they hear me say that, when I use the language objective. If I was to just say, use the word opinion or subjective, the shields go up and it's like, oh, you're scaring me right now, Doug. I don't want to talk to you. So I think there is some pragmatic usefulness to using the word objective. And I think it is
Yeah.
right. I do think I'm using the word the right way.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, that actually well kind of confirms what I took uh, from the discussion I watched, discussion with Pete, Billy, and yourself. That it may be useful, and this way you can actually skip over the battle of definitions and just get to the actual content. That maybe yeah that I don't even have a problem with that. So but we are well atheists amongst ourselves, right? So maybe okay, let's just explore this from our perspective. Objective. I would, for example, say that something is objective when it is true whether or not humans exist. Even if all humans vanished, right? Objective reality, then a rock would still be a rock, and I'm not talking about the word, right? So objective reality is like the thing that's outside of us, that's independent of our opinions, our thoughts, and that would actually, if we wipe ourselves out tomorrow, then it would still be objectively true that there is like a sun with planets around it and all that, and provided we don't actually melt the face of the earth, there will still be rocks, right? So I would think that in that sense, morality can't be objective because it only applies to the behavior and conduct of humans amongst themselves, ourselves, and also towards animals, probably. Well, I would say. So yeah, that might be why I wouldn't use the word objective myself, because it only relates to humans.
I hear what you're saying, and I think I agree with you. However, even if we were to wipe ourselves out and there was no intelligent life left in the universe, isn't the whole even concept of truth a human construct? Like the rock is still a rock. Yeah, but what does it matter? It's like if the tree falls in the forest and doesn't make a sound. It's like
Mm.
this whole concept of what is almost goes away if there's no conscious minds to think about it.
Well, yeah. There's nothing to think that thought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's an interesting philosophical
but
question, but um, well, let me ask you
and
this.
sure.
And this is one thing that I struggle with. You know, my I have my box and I put things into my box subjectively, but I do think there might be things I put in my box objectively based on evolution. And whether I acknowledge it or not, maybe there's certain things that I just almost instinctively put in there. Now, the theist would call this the imprint of his will on the hearts of man, but you and I would probably call it, well, the result of millions of years of evolution through natural selection that have instinctively put certain things. Like, for example,
Altruism.
Well, no. Well, think about this. Imagine you're at a restaurant and you're just sitting there talking to your friend. You're, let's say, in the um, outdoor part, and there's people sitting around you, and there's a baby in a high chair who you don't know. You don't know the baby, you don't know the mother, the father, but a baby in a high chair
And
right next to
he's
you.
falling over.
The baby's falling over. You instinctively will leap to save that baby without even consciously thinking. Now that if that what I just said is true, like you're not weighing the pros and cons. Well, I don't even know this kid. Why should I risk scraping my elbow diving to, these thoughts don't even enter your brain. It's almost like instinctive, boom, it happens. And you see this
Hmm.
within species all the time. Now, if that type of action or reaction happens because of evolution, maybe some of the things I'm putting in my box are for the same reasons. It's almost instinctive. And so, in that way, you can use the word objective, like we were talking about something almost, well, I wouldn't say outside of humans, but it's not based on conscious decisions. It's based on.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I'm following you. Um, so is your point then, just to make sure that I am following, is your point then that it is objectively moral because it's part of your instinct caused, which has been shaped by evolution? Is that the reason why it's moral instead of immoral?
No, I'm not making a judgment on whether something's moral or not, but I'm just making a judgment of maybe what I'm putting in my box. Like I mentioned, well-being and unnecessary suffering. Maybe there's a third
Mm.
thing called evolutionary instinct or something like that that's ingrained in our species.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this doesn't say anything about the objectiveness of what you put in into the box. It's just a distinction between like consciously putting something in the box or instinctively putting
Right.
something in
Yeah.
the box.
Yeah. And maybe
Okay.
that instinctual thing we could say is approaching objectivity, because we're not. When you think of opinion and subjectivity, you're thinking of thinking about things and weighing the pros and cons and coming up with a belief of what's good and bad, and so then you stick it in your box. Um, but this is something deeper at a much deeper level that you really don't even think about it. It just almost
Yeah,
happens
but why would you call that approaching objectivity?
because of the fact that you're not deliberating about it. You're not consciously thinking about it. You're
Okay, so then it sounds like that the fact that it's part of your instinct does make it more objective.
yes,
If we can uh, visualize objective and subjective not as a binary choice but as a scale or a spectrum.
yeah. See, when I view the
Which
term
may, which may,
subject,
which may be kind of weird, but
like when I view the term subjective, I view it as like you got level one thinking and level two thinking in your brain. Um, Subjectivity, I think, is the level two thinking where you're actually considering, you're pondering, and it's the thinking
well,
and the pondering, which is what you put in your box. But maybe there's things that
okay,
I'm putting in my box that are not that.
yeah, but I have to admit, there's like this SE um, thought. I have something ready to go, uh, SE wise, which will probably sweep the rug out under of this thought. And the SE question would be, well, are there any instinctive actions or instinctive impulses that people have or do that we consider immoral?
Yeah,
Or to put in another word, is there stuff that is instinctive, but that you leave out of the box?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. Um, like if you look at other higher apes, they don't ask permission to have coitus. I don't think.
Okay.
You
Hmm.
imagine a big silverback um, approaching a female gorilla. It's not
Yeah.
like,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah. I see your point, but I was just like keeping it simple, keeping it human. Um, just the fact that there are like selfish actions that people do instinctively that we would consider immoral in general. Starting with something as simple as the child not wanting to share its toy, uh, up to, well, all sorts of selfish acts
you know,
that can be, well, beneficial in the short term, and that's part of the instinct. I mean, so even that instinct is, well, it's not very clear cut, but I really do see morality as this construct where we actually have thought it out and rise above our instinct, and maybe keep some stuff not because it's instinct, but because it has passed the test, basically.
yeah. Well, I'm
So
thinking,
I don't think objective applies there. The word doesn't apply there.
like, I'm thinking more like stuff. I don't know. Well, maybe there are people out there. This is a horrible example, but there's a pile of feces in front of you, and most people would be what's the word? Revulsion, with having your face stuck into that.
Yeah,
Terrible, horrible smells. It's not a cognitive thing. It's a instinctive. This is not
it's a
good for
defense
you.
mechanism.
Yeah, it's a defense mechanism. So that's the sort of things I'm thinking about, where why we would say it would be wrong for me to take a pile of poo and throw it into somebody's face, because it's based on, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are people out there who enjoy that, but but I think that would be
It
the.
probably only takes 7 seconds on Google to find someone. Probably with video evidence.
Well, I don't deny that there's people who do that, but willingly, but I don't know if they would actually like it. But
I don't know.
there is, through evolution, like there's certain tastes that we just cannot hold in our mouth for too long, that will spit it out
Hmm.
instinctively. And think of,
Yeah. So
yeah,
and this links to morality, because then you would say that, well, to force somebody else to have that experience
right,
is immoral. That's the point here.
yeah. So like that's why we wouldn't forcibly open someone's mouth and pour battery acid down. It's not like we've considered the pros and cons. We just almost instinctively know that, hey, when this is in our mouth, I guess it's still based on experience of, you don't know it until you try it the first time, um, but yeah, it is such a deep rooted biological response that maybe we can say that's approaching to something called objective. Uh, but I guess in a world with 7 billion people, if
Yeah.
there's just one exception, then I don't know, does it now
Yeah.
become subjective?
Yeah. It just doesn't seem to me that this connection between instinct and objective morality holds up. Just because there are, if we have like a list of, I don't know, maybe 20, maybe 100 different instinctive actions or reactions, they would fall on both sides.
Yeah,
They
I
would fall
agree.
in both categories. Some we would call some moral, others immoral. It's also an instinct for most people to flee from danger, um like in a panic, without any thought for the people around them. Like people getting trampled when there's like panic at a stadium or in a plane, or
Yeah.
right situations like that. So
And plus,
yeah, I
there's
really don't see
always,
how that would hold up.
and plus, you can always think of a moral dilemma where drinking battery acid could be the moral thing to do, or forcing someone else to drink battery acid would be the moral thing to do if it will save a million lives by
Yeah,
doing so.
yeah, yeah, but then you get into like that train track dilemma,
Yeah.
and the like the yeah the thought experiment with that, which basically still that only shows, in my mind, that morality is subjective. The fact that we can think of examples like that, where an otherwise in normal an action which in normal circumstances would be considered immoral might be moral in extreme circumstances.
Yeah.
And you can do those thought experiments, but I mean there have been situations in real life, like lying is generally bad unless it's to hide Jews from Nazis.
The thing is, it is good to talk about what we're talking about right now and to even to struggle with some of these issues of what is right and what is wrong. I think it is noble to do so versus saying, no, this is wrong because my God said so. I, I just, to me, it reminds me of my kids at a young age. Daddy, just tell me the answer, or just tell me what to do. I just want to know, yes or no, right or wrong. It's just like, how is that a better way to live your life rather than actually sitting down and thinking through these things? So,
Yeah,
Theus, if
I
you're
think
listening
it's
to this,
worthwhile.
I want an answer to that one.
Mhm. So it sounds like that. Sounds like we have explored the 3 points I brought up reasonably well, and we've even veered off into the pragmatic side of things. I don't no longer have to use the word tactics there. Uh, yeah, well, when labeling, using the word objective, so you can move on, might be the pragmatic thing to do.
Have you ever seen Scott Clifton from Theoretical Bullshit and Matt Slick? Have you ever seen that video? There's a video of.
No, I've watched. I don't think so. I've watched the two. I've recently watched the two debates with Matt Slick and with the Bible Beer Consortium. One with David Smalley and the other one with Dillahunty. Those are the ones, and I've seen Matt Slick phone in on the Atheist Experience once. And I think that's all I've seen of Matt Slick.
But what Scott Clifton did with Matt Slick, I think, was genius. He basically did a thought experiment. Said, "Okay, Matt, you're tied up in a room. You can't move. You're sitting on a chair, and I'm in there with you, and so is the little baby. I'm about to rape the baby. Tell me why I shouldn't. Tell me why that's immoral." And Matt Slick's answer was, "Well, you shouldn't do it because it's a sin. God says don't do that." And Scott Clifton's answer was, "Is it Scott Clifton? Yeah." He said, "Oh yeah, I agree with you. God did say that this is a bad thing to do, but I don't care. I'm going to do it anyhow. Tell me why I shouldn't." So what Scott was trying to do is to get Matt to reason why
Hmm.
it's wrong rather than just say it's wrong because God says so. And Matt Slick struggled with that. He could not even come up with things like, Well, imagine, Scott, this was your baby. Would you want someone doing that to your baby? You didn't even think to go down the empathy road, or to go down the road of, do we want to live in a society where this sort of thing happens and you're in constant fear of your babies, this could happen? Didn't even try. He basically just said, well, no, it's wrong because God says so. And I thought that was a brilliant, pragmatic way of showing the theist that the God said so argument is not really good. You need to think why things are bad or things are wrong or things are immoral.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's a good one. Um, I wonder if you would how far we would get with the well, God's morality is just his opinion route, the might makes right route. What would happen if you explored that direction?
And
Stuff between humans.
most Christians I do talk to do refer to this concept of objective morality as a function or completely dependent upon the nature of God. That's
Hmm.
unchanging, not influenced, and therefore what you just described as being objective. God's not appealing to something outside himself to determine what's moral. He is what's moral. So they would say that's why it's objective. But here's the problem with that idea, especially in religions that believe in a personal God. If a God is personal and interacts with his creation, he is now influenced by it. He now makes decisions based on whoever he's being personal with. He's not a robot or just a, what he adapts to the person. He's a personal God. So now that takes, and you see that in holy texts. You see that in scriptures, where God acts a certain way to one group of people, and says this is moral for you, and then a different type of person says this is moral for you.
Yeah, yeah, and that so that actually speaks against God's morality being
Yes,
objective.
right.
I agree because even the concept of a new covenant and old covenant, that in itself makes God's morality subjective.
Right. Relative, yeah.
But yeah, but yeah, relative in time or applicable to some people, not others. You might even say that the idea that God is allowed to do some things, but that humans aren't allowed to do, makes morality subjective.
Yep.
So because it's not the same rules for everybody.
Yeah, what we're talking about here is the Euthyphro dilemma. Are you familiar with
I've
that?
heard about that one recent.
Yeah.
I've heard about it recently, actually, because I'm actually subscribed to what's the channel called? It's by Hank Green. He does a lot of stuff. He does SciShow and he does Crash Course. Crash Course, that's
Yeah.
the one.
Yeah.
So there's like all these Crash Course series, and one of them is philosophy, and it's still running. So there's like a new episode every week. And one of them, I think only 2 or 3 weeks ago, mentioned that exact one, and it also, I think the last one actually mentioned divine command theory.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, the Euthyphro dilemma is this. Is God's nature what it is because it's good? Or are good things good because they reflect God's nature? Now, it can't be both. Because, now listen to this. If God's nature is what it is because it's good, then that means there's a
Then there's
standard
not.
above God, which God is judged. And Christians
Yeah,
don't like to hear
which we
that.
we no which we just mentioned, and I said they won't accept that. Yeah,
But if it's the latter, if good things are good because they reflect God's nature, then however God's nature is demonstrated becomes good. So, in other words, any action that you see can be deemed good or bad depending on whether that God sanctions it. So in either case, you run into problems. You either have to admit there's a
Yeah.
standard of morality independent of this God that this God follows, or you have to admit that the divine command theory that abortion is wrong unless God sanctions it or commands it, then it becomes right.
Yeah.
And both do
Okay.
not
So
sit well with the theist. Okay, guys, take care.